I have a question for you. What makes two people experience the same traumatic experience and have vastly different reactions to it? One feels like it's traumatic, one feels like it is horrible and something that they're having a hard time getting over for years, but another person in the same experience sees it more like a snap and clear, something that's really not that big of a deal. A story. A woman is in a horrible relationship, and she's on vacation. They're in a hotel room, and on the worst nights of this relationship, amongst other horrible things, he kicks her, breaking her ribs. She doesn't know the damage that's done, but she knows she's in excruciating pain, and she knows she probably should go to the hospital. She safely gets herself out of the hotel room. She goes down to the lobby, and she calls herself an Uber to the hospital. And she's waiting out in the cold. She starts thinking about things. Things start sinking in for her. She goes to the hospital. They may ask her, was this domestic violence? She wasn't sure she was ready. Were the kids ready? Was her pathway? Everything started coming to her. And as the Uber driver pulls up, she pulls out her phone, she pulls up the app, and she cancels the ride. Uber even gave her a second chance to reconsider going. It asked her, do you want to accept the cancellation fee? And I don't know if you all have done this, but no one ever wants to accept the cancellation fee. But she said yes, and she turned around, and she went back into the hotel room. Did she do the right thing? Did she do the wrong thing? Or perhaps, maybe that isn't even the right question. Do you understand her decision? Today, we don't have time to get into the different topics that we may want to discuss or more information that we want to have for us to make our own decision. And I ask you it gutturally, what do you think? We may hear things like, well, it was the right decision because sometimes the system doesn't support. Or this was the wrong decision. The next time he may do something more damaging. But I know this. It's a tough call. I'm intrigued by the notion of choice and the skill of decision making. And I've been gathering stories like these for almost 20 years. I started my studies at the College of William & Mary, and I continued my studies and research to the academic settings and as a private practitioner of a mental health counselor, therapist, and instructor. I started asking these questions about people's lives in a really hard topic, a very taboo one, actually, the topic of sex and sexuality. And when I asked people about their decisions and their choices within this topic of sexuality, it came to one thing, always. Did they think they made a choice with purpose and intention? And interesting, the data showed me that if they did, it kind of didn't matter how it turned out. They would feel okay about themselves and the situation. And so I discovered this. When we choose with our own volition, with a full sense of self-determination, we tend to find resiliency. And we are less likely to feel like we are a victim. All right, here's another opportunity for you to choose. This is the scenario. It is dark, it is rainy, you are in a car. The first time I wanted you to think through this gutturally. Now I want you to think through your body. What is your body saying when I give you these two options? The first is, you're driving. You're tired, you're stressed, but you know the route and you trust your car. Or second, someone else is driving and they have had 3 accidents, you just found out about them. They think you are very dramatic, holding the oh shit handle next to the window, and they just told you they forgot their nighttime glasses. Which do you prefer? I don't know about you, but I prefer to be behind the wheel. But I haven't always lived my life this way. What I've discovered was when I was asking people in my research about their decision-making and their life choices, I realized that I wasn't, in some of the biggest times in my life, I wasn't behind the driver's seat of my own car, of my own decision-making. In fact, when I started looking at the big decisions in my life, about 98% of them, I didn't follow my instinct. I let somebody else guide me, someone who sounded like they knew what they were doing more than me. And 98% of those went to shit. But I haven't always made bad decisions. I've actually have a pretty good life, and I've made some really good decisions in my life. But when I started looking at the patterns, when I started looking at these things in my life, I realized that there was times that I felt like I had messed up my life beyond repair. Some of the big decisions I let other people decide for me were set into motion. I couldn't retract them. And that felt frustrating and overwhelming. And I didn't want to be the person that was teaching agency and teaching about this and asking people, but not living it in my own life, at least not consistently. So I started looking. I started looking for theories and practical things and things that I could reach and I could put into my life. And I didn't see anything that worked for me, that identified who I was and what I was doing with my life. So the academic became personal and the personal became academic. And I looked and I looked. And I don't remember the exact day and the time or what I was looking at when the word popped off the screen for me. But it was there. And the word was agency. And at that time, I didn't know exactly what it meant, but I knew I wanted it. So what is agency? Don't bother looking it up because you're not going to find very helpful definitions out there. A lot of times when I talk about it, people will say, oh, do you mean PR agency or marketing or government? No, that's not what I'm talking about. And the definition often says that the act of agency is agency, which is just not helpful. As an academic, I wanted to begin coming up with my own definition. And I wanted to know why. As a therapist, I wanted to understand what. And as a human with a hard-fought journey to agency, I wanted to know the how-to of agency. And it began with words and phrases, finding my voice, knowing what I needed. My yeses, my nos, my yucks and my yums, showing up for myself, not abandoning myself, learning my terms and then living them. I wanted agency. I wanted this term to grow and to put me into the equation. And I wanted that for other people as well. So agency, it's a noun, a verb, a concept, and a skill. And that is why it's so hard to describe. It's all of these things. If I were to give my urban definition of this, it would be, my urban dictionary definition of this, it would be agency is decision-making with your head up, your face forward, and your eyes open. But here's my official one, and there's 4 parts to what I think agency is. It's the capacity and ability for an individual to recognize that there's an opportunity for a decision, to predict likely outcomes, and to accept and reflect on the outcomes that actually come to bear, and then to learn and to let go. The verb of agency. Agency is active. It requires thought and action. You can't just think or feel your way into agency. Verbs like recognize, accept, predict, make, let go, learn. And the concept. The concept is the ability to make your own decisions and to create and construct relationships and communities that promote your decision-making individually and collectively. And then finally, the skill. And this is what I looked for most. And I'm going to warn you that at first, this is going to seem insultingly simple. But when you start putting agency, as I've described it, into your life, you start looking back and reflecting upon it and putting it into your future, you're going to see it's actually not simple. It's quite complicated. So the first is with these 5, that you know there's a decision to be made. You understand that you're not going to just let it happen to you. You're going to actively be part of it, and there is a decision there for you. Second is you feel confident that you can make a good decision aligned with your purpose and made with intention. You know that you're the right person to make this decision, and this is the right time. Third, you make the decision actively. You understand that this is not something that's just going to happen. You're going to do this. And fourth, you live with the intended and unintended consequences of it. Sometimes we don't know what's going to happen, but you know you're going to be okay. There's an okayness and a trust in yourself. And fifth, you make meaning of all those other steps, those 4 steps, and you use a balance and a combination of resiliency and protection. Now, after these 5 steps, there's 4 loops. The first is knowing yourself. You have to know yourself if you're going to make a decision that's aligned with your purpose and intention. Second is you have to practice and value and understand that multiple perspectives are at play, that your decisions are not made in a vacuum, and that there's ripple effects for your life for years to come, as well as other people when you make a decision. Third is you have to embrace the tolerance for ambiguity And I did not like this one. In fact, I really didn't want to be a part of this data that was coming out because I spent a lifetime thinking and preparing a life of certainty, meaning safety. But what I have found after talking to thousands of people is that tolerance for ambiguity and not knowing the outcome that you'll be okay is safety. And fourth, intersectional access. Agency is our birthright, yet we don't all have the same access to it, and this is because of the intersections of our life, with race, with sexual orientation, with gender identity, with socioeconomic status. Some of us have a doorway that's this big, some like this, and some like this. But once you get through the doorway, agency has this beautiful way of equalizing things and lessening the negative effects of the isms in our life. So if all this agency stuff seems a bit overwhelming, I want you to feel some solace in this. Some studies, and some of us have seen that we make up to 35,000, 37,000 decisions in a day, and only about 70 of them, or a small percentage of them, actually come to bear in a conscious way, and even a lesser percentage require that we activate our agency in them. As a therapist, I've been really lucky to be able to work with people all over the globe, and I've seen people making big decisions in real time. And in contexts like going to federal prison or healing from sexual assault or trying to make a decision about this last infertility treatment. And I've made some observations that I hope will help you as you are putting agency into your life. New chances to choose. Some of us are so far away from agency that we feel beaten down by life that even thinking of agency feels very risky. But I want you to have solace in this too. Once you start working with agency, especially regularly, you'll notice decision points in your life emerging. You start seeing brand new chances to choose, and you feel a sense of control in your life. Next is analysis paralysis. Sometimes people have the opposite problem, that they see so many choices that they don't know where to begin or which one to choose, or they focus on catastrophic thinking and outliers. But know this, catastrophic thinking actually destroys agency, and what you want to do is focus on the fact that large in part they do not come to fruition. When you realize this, you start feeling more and more realistic and grounded in the decisions that you're making. You make a decision when you don't. Not making a choice when confronted with an opportunity to choose is a choice. It's just a choice not to choose. Indecision is active too. Indecision doesn't protect you from pain. If there's a decision to be made and you choose not to make it, the decision will still be made, just not by you. Someone will make the decision, either in favor of you or against you. It's a time machine. Agency is a superpower. It does two things. Magically, agency can help you heal from your past, things that you're holding on to. And agency can help protect you and build resiliency in your current and future decisions. You always have you. Sometimes agency can overwhelm, and sometimes it can underwhelm. But working with it makes it work. Something really cool happens whether you activate your agency or simply acknowledge its existence. Knowing you aren't alone in your decisions and that you have something concrete and foundational often is enough to have the impact because you have you. Yeah, sometimes agency doesn't feel good. When I ask people to put words to how they're feeling about their agency, sometimes they'll say, it's terrible, I don't like it at all. Because sometimes activating your agency means that you have to end relationships and change paths or say no or say yes, and that can feel bad. But that's actually describing the feeling that you get with the consequences of some of your decisions, not actually activating your agency. When I ask people about that, they use words like grounded and peaceful. I want you to understand that distinction. In sexuality, I told you that this is where I began my research within sexual agency. And it's one of the hardest places to activate agency. But that means it's also one of the best places to have the opportunity for transformation. So please don't overlook this part of your life. Know that if you make a conscious effort to have agency in your sexual life, you will benefit greatly. And yeah, you've got the power. Agency isn't about overthinking. It isn't about micromanaging every single decision. It's about knowing that you can, that you have the power to do so, and understanding that it's okay to be okay. And you're going to feel more capable and resilient because of it. Boundaries and empowerment. This one surprised me, and then I really understood it. There's an interdependence between empowerment and boundaries and agency, but these concepts aren't the same. Empowerment and boundaries aren't their goal, agency is. Agency is becoming a buzz term now, and it's almost being used simultaneously with healthy boundaries and with empowerment, but I don't think it should be. Agency is the goal, and boundaries and empowerments are a step along the way to the pathway to agency, not the other way around. The order matters, and the emphasis is critical. Agency is relational, empowerment is individual. Empowerment and boundaries have the power to change your world, and this is amazing. But agency has the power and the ability to change your world and everyone else's world too. And the time is now to have a change to a culture of agency. We all know the experience we've seen when people, relationships, communities, and companies don't have agency. We see things like oppressive legislation. We see domestic violence and sexual assault. We see systematic problems like slavery and genocide. The damage is widespread and has enormous generational ripple effects and individual cellular consequences. But just like negativity is contagious, so is positivity when you see agency in action. I was fortunate enough to see the incredible Isabel Wilkerson speak about her amazing book, The Warmth of Other Suns. And in this, she's speaking about the great migration of 6 million African Americans who left the South in order to find a better life in other areas of the United States. These 6 million brave souls individually activated their agency, and our country collectively experienced it. And when she was speaking about this, I sat in my notebook because I was taking copious notes. She was so inspiring, and I wrote, she's talking about agency, and then she said it. They activated their agency, and I sat there in such awe. It always chokes me up and think, I can't imagine with these amazing souls what they thought of when they knew they couldn't stay anymore in the soil of where they were planted. And they had this tolerance for ambiguity and this audacity to believe that their life could be better in the warmth of other suns. And that is what agency feels like on scale. We all have a path to agency. Typically, the pathway to agency isn't smooth nor easy. No one gets through life unscathed. Everyone is affected by agency or the lack thereof, including me. That woman in the beginning of my talk, the woman who canceled her Uber driver, was me. I'm the one that did that. I'm the woman who said no. And I used to be so angry at myself. I used to be so ashamed of that decision. I used to think I hadn't activated my agency. But then I realized this wasn't a time that I didn't activate my agency. I actually did. It was a gathering of myself. It was a belief in my instinct for once. It wasn't abandoning. It wasn't shameful. It was a proclamation. And that proclamation was, I will never be a woman that experiences that again. And I made good on that proclamation. One in agency. I was one of the lucky ones. I knew of agency. I had access to agency, and I had a protective community of agency providers. Agency saved my life, and it changed it, and I want to do that for you as well. It's your birthright to claim agency. Don't turn your back on this. Learn life on your terms and love it. Understand that we cannot do this alone. Life isn't self-contained. It is meant to be relational. Life is meant to be lived interdependently and in a community of agency. Help me build it.